Just fix it in post.
Oh yeah, that's great, but we'll never use it.
There's no budget, and it was due like yesterday.
There's been a slight change in direction.
I promise, it's just one last revision.
Welcome to Just Fix It in Post, industry insights straight from the source. I'm your host, Sean Rice, and welcome. A brand builder, content creator, and all-around creative powerhouse, he's been shaping some of the automotive industry's biggest campaigns. From launching the iconic Stingray to crafting stories for Chevrolet that resonate across every media channel, he's the go-to guy for bold, unforgettable work. And when he's not busy building brands, you might find him freediving. Let's give it up for Mike.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
I feel like everybody knows about you, everybody knows of you, but doesn't necessarily know you personally. And the reason I feel like that is because Americana is synonymous with freedom and the open road. Like every kid grew up with the poster on their wall of the classic American vehicle, and that represents freedom. And you have the opportunity to set the look for what Americana is with automobiles. And I feel like so much of the other work that's out there takes inspiration from that. Like when the Corvette was redesigned, and it was this flashy, bright, shiny object. It was just like, you start to see that kind of influence everything else. And that's why I'm so excited to have you here. Tell me, how did you get into this? Where'd you start? You was a baby, playing with toy cars. What was your thing?
Actually, it's funny you say that. Yeah. When I was a kid, one of my earliest memories was I had this comforter on my bed, and it was these really graphic cars and trucks, 100 of them. They're just kind of profile, really graphic silhouettes. And as long as I can remember, I always loved cars. I loved riding in them. I wanted to drive ever since I could walk. I love all kinds of vehicles. I can find something to love in a garbage truck, obviously high performance machines, toys, snowmobiles, anything with a motor, anything that goes. Anything you can drive has always just fascinated me. I just kind of lucked into this industry, I guess. I was a big AV nerd in high school. The radio, I was lucky enough to go to a pretty big high school. We had a TV station, kind of a fledgling cable TV station and radio station. Every chance I got, I was like doing something, shooting something, making a short film, making music videos. I grew up in Nashville, so the music industry was big there. So music videos kind of just happen, shooting those for my friends or just making fun stuff. Did an internship in college. I was thinking about actually going to law school. Pretty good at getting my friends out of trouble. I did an internship at a just amazing agency. They were called Berlin Cameron and Partners at the time. I think they're like Berlin Cameron Red Cell, or they may have changed. I think they're still around. But I showed up there, this kid from Nashville, not knowing what I was doing, and the halls were just full of these huge names and personalities and, doing just really remarkable work. That was, the end of the 90s. So that was back, when a big brand spot was like a big brand spot. One thing they did that it happened before I got there, but you may remember, you may not, I don't know if you're old enough, but at one point, Bill Murray called a press conference to announce he was going to join the NBA. And it seemed like a legitimate press conference. Like Michael Jordan was playing, I think, baseball at the time, and he gave this press conference, and everybody's like, "What are you talking about?" And he was dead serious, and it went on for a while, and it turns out the whole thing was a Reebok stunt, but these guys were behind that, and they would just do this work that just blew my mind, and they were all such incredible craftspeople, just the design work and the thinking. Anyway, so I get there knowing nothing about advertising or ad agencies, and just my head exploded. And I was like, this is what I want to do. So I talked to them, I'm sure I annoyed the crap out of all of them, because I would just dive right in. I try and learn as much as possible, because I had 3 months in New York City. And they encouraged me to check out the Creative Circus. It was awesome. Crazy in retrospect, 2 years, and kind of competitive program, at the end of which you wind up with a portfolio of fake ads, which is, like no master's degree, no. So I bounced around the country, chasing work, chasing jobs. I had a lot of fun. And my wife and I were living in Nashville. We were back in Nashville at the time. We were like, let's go. Let's move somewhere else. So we went to a bar. We made a list we got little pieces of paper and wrote the name of a different city at the top of each one. And it was like Tokyo, Paris, Boston, and the pros and cons of each. And we got to Detroit, and she's from Detroit, and I always wanted to work on cars. Detroit was kind of the clear winner, and based on what's really important to us and our values. So we figured, let's try it. So we came up here and took a crack at it. Not a good time to work here. It was '07. The economy here was already
it was pretty rough back then.
Yeah, and about to get rougher.
Yeah,
hard work and passion for what you do will get you through most things. And we got really lucky, still here now. Yeah,
that's so cool. So when did the relationship with Chevy start?
Chevy started about 10 years ago. I was lucky enough to be a part of an agency in Detroit that was called Rogue, and we were built to service the Cadillac brand. And there was a team, the brand creative was handled in Boston at Modernista by a, really talented group of people. And then we did all the below the line stuff. So all the web content, all the social, all the CRM, pretty much everything that wasn't broadcast or print at the time. And then we wound up taking over like all brand photography, all the video that wasn't broadcast. GM decided to move Cadillac to Soho in New York. The guy leading that agency moved over to Commonwealth to kind of be the general manager of the Commonwealth Detroit business. And I wound up following him over to Commonwealth to work on Chevy.
What brands were you overseeing at that, during that entire period? Was it Chevy and then we say everything under GM or?
Yeah, just Chevy. So Commonwealth was so sad, was a purpose-built division of McCann Erickson to service the Chevrolet brand globally. So it wasn't all the marketing because a machine like General Motors is so massive. There's like training videos, there's dealer communications, there's all sorts of stuff, but all brand above and below the line work was all through us. And here in Detroit, we were like the North American brand center and kind of the hub of the Commonwealth network. And then our offices, Sao Paulo, Mexico City, Buenos Aires, Moscow, Dubai, Toronto, Korea, Johannesburg, New Delhi, Singapore, because China's like its own thing. We were in Europe for a while, but got out. I think we have an office in Bangkok still. Commonwealth's still handling the global business for GM.
What do you kind of oversee for that brand?
So Commonwealth was Chevy, like all Chevy, just Chevy. General Motors got a new CMO maybe a year and a half ago. As new CMOs do, they needed to shake up the marketing. So they moved the Chevy business and all the GM brand business, so Chevy, GMC, Buick, and Cadillac, to new agencies. We shut down Commonwealth, and McCann was able to move a lot of people to McCann Birmingham. My understanding is McCann is actually investing heavily in McCann Detroit, and I can tell you we are aggressively pitching some massive pieces of new business, which hopefully we'll be able to share good news on in the near future.
When someone comes to you with a project, whether it's a vehicle launch or if you want to give an example of something you did in the last year or so, with the lineup that you're overseeing, maybe we can walk you through the process of what a project looks like and then what your process is from kind of start to finish to final deliverable.
For context, like right now I'm working on a Bright Drop project, which are like the electric delivery vans, like Amazon vans basically. So that's pretty cool. So for most projects, the way it works is I'll partner with the marketing client who's responsible for owning the marketing of that vehicle nameplate. We'll basically, have a conversation about like, where does this vehicle live? What does it do? Who is it targeted at? What is its main focus? We loop in strategy. We do a lot of competitive analysis on what are other brands doing? What is the conversation being had? And how do we, step into that and improve and ultimately own that conversation ideally. I'd begin to build a world. How does this vehicle look and feel? Where does it go? What does it do? Who drives it? What's the tone of that? From there, working with everybody, because there's a lot of stakeholders. You have marketing clients, but you also have General Motors Design, which obviously has a lot of passion for it because they actually create, they design the vehicles. We're marketing, and they all have, great eyes for artistry and branding and tone and look and feel. So you kind of go through all the corporate step that you need to go through to launch a vehicle and then build a team like Kip I've worked with in the past,
right.
On a launch before, and then go out and shoot it and make it and then finish it up and then turn it into a campaign.
Do you know exactly what channels you're developing content for? You're talking probably specifically about a vehicle launch, or you don't know?
If it's a vehicle launch, I don't know. We move forward and build production based on the assumption that it's every channel.
Got it.
Every vehicle launch, there's always like the shot. And you can try and plan, but you never know what it is until you're out there shooting and you make it. And then oftentimes you don't even know till post, right? The light's just right, the location's just right, and it's just the angle where the vehicle just has that little pull that when you look at it, you you really want it. And then that shot ideally goes everywhere. You don't get much attention these days. Not that you ever did in the world of advertising, but I think the competition for people's attention is much greater now than ever before. You'll need an asset, to use a word I don't like very much, piece of art, but it's like you may have your launch vehicle this big, but you need, this much for YouTube. You need banner ads this big. You need social content that's 9x16, and you need, TV content that's 16x9, and you need billboards, and, basically you just try and get a lot of background.
In terms of the motion aspect of that, are you guys creating commercials out of that kind of work hand in hand with the stills, or are you doing that separately, or how does that work for you guys?
Well, there's two ways of doing it. One is like if we get a TV brief and we know we're going to put it on TV, then you're coming up with an ad, like a spot concept. From there, it's a bit of a different process. Everything is SAG. The budgets tend to be a lot larger, and it's all kind of built in with that predetermination for broadcast. Then there's like running footage and web video stuff, which if it's not meant for broadcast, we typically would not shoot SAG unless, we really need to. It's like, there's a chance we may pick it up, so we'll just go ahead and do SAG. Then we just go out and like shoot it. And then, usually it's all about the car. On my shoots, there's not a lot of like fancy dinners and resort hotels and the kind of Hollywood production stuff you see. It's kind of a crew of pirates going out and just making the cars look like $1 million.
How much is people you have on staff and freelance? What's kind of the process, that you would use to execute a creative concept?
Typically, everybody's freelance. Yeah.
Did you work on the Corvette like redesign launch?
Yes.
Can you kind of walk me through that? What that was like in terms of, the creative and the shiny new object? That would be really great.
Yeah, sure. It's been a couple of years.
Take your time.
There's an amazingly kind of bright and focused spotlight on that project from the get-go, because a mid-engine Corvette is like the holy grail of performance. It rebalances the entire machine and unlocks like the next level of what a car can do. That's why a Lamborghini and a Ferrari, the motors in the back, Porsche 911s, it's a better design. But to do that in a way, in my opinion, that General Motors was comfortable bringing that forward, it requires just a monumental investment of time and resources and commitment to kind of change history. And I'm maybe speaking kind of grandiose, but it's the Corvette. I mean, that's what little kids have hanging on their walls, and it truly is a piece of American history. It represented, I think, a shift to me. It represented a commitment on GM's part, and I'm totally just assuming this, not to speak for them, but that they were ready to really establish I don't know what the right metaphor is, a new bar for what a supercar is that you can buy for attainable price. I mean, for $85,000, if you can get one, because that's kind of hard. Everybody wants them, right? You can get a car that can do what a $300,000-$400,000 car can do, and you can just take it to the grocery store, and you can take it to a Chevy dealer to get it serviced. It's a race car that literally you can just daily drive, and it's totally fine doing that. It's not going to blow up. You're not going to hurt it. That's kind of a long explanation to kind of bring around to the fact that there were a lot of eyeballs on that launch. A lot of involvement from not only the marketing manager who I was, began working directly with to start that launch, but then her superiors within marketing, their superiors within GM, all the way up to the leadership at GM, to the designers who designed the car. I don't know if there's a word for it, like legacy, like people who had worked on Corvette in the past that maybe didn't even work, like were maybe retired, but still connected to everybody. Like everybody was very, very passionate about it. There's kind of developing the creative, but then there's this other thing when you work with any massive, international organization, which is navigating processes within the corporation to kind of get work approved, get your project okayed, but also kind of protect it for a vision that is really going to like stick and work and be impactful. This is designed by committee, right? You get too many opinions, and, by the time you kind of get through it all, you kind of wind up with a slightly beat up, but hopefully still solid version of your initial concept. Usually it's like some of the real edgy stuff just comes down a little bit, because if you were going to spend $40 million on an ad campaign, are you going to put a picture with some really evocative model and you can barely see your product, or are you going to want to put your product front and center? And which I think is pretty common struggle in advertising, that balance between pushing the product and the creative being a ton of fun. I think we kept it together pretty good, though.
What was kind of the target demo for that?
If I remember correctly, there were 4 or 5, and they were personas. They all had names, because there were the people who already had a Corvette, loved Corvette, were dying to get this new one. and were kind of already in the family. Then there were other people who like could kind of buy whatever car they want and they wanted it for show, but did they really want a Corvette? Because they were more into, European brands, or, there was a lot of label awareness or whatever, the perception was a big driving factor. And then there were other people who can just like, money is no object, drive whatever they want, put one of those in their garage.
When you're creating the idea, you're trying to look at it in a way where like, hey, we want to make sure we turn on these people and check all those marks. Is that kind of the idea?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. In fact, like the content creation, because it's never like, hey, let's just go do a shoot. Because sometimes I'll find myself in that situation. It's like, hey, we got to shoot this thing. Can you be ready in a couple of weeks? And it's like, no, man. Like, we got to do some research. We got to come up with something, really, really smart. And it's all, if you don't really start with a super sound strategy and really stick to that throughout your production, then you're going to go somewhere that ultimately isn't really going to live and have those legs, because it's that strategy that drives everything. Yeah. And if you stay on strategy and, kind of build that box that's on strategy, then creatively you just go wild in it.
You kind of touched on a little bit. Car advertising has gotten really dumbed down. For lack of a better term, vanilla or boring in terms of it's safe. It's not edgy because it doesn't want to turn off people. It's not shocking because you've got product, you've got legal, the client, everybody kind of has their input. First of all, how do you look and see at car advertising right now? And then how do you kind of handle the challenges that are presented to you with these particular vehicles?
Legal and safety is a big one. It's amazing, and it changes. Sometimes you can't park a truck on grass. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can't go sideways in the mud. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you have to be parked perfectly in a parking space, and sometimes you don't. The parking space is one. That's one I struggle with sometimes, because sometimes they're so graphic and the lines are great and it's just better as it is. But then you got to like draw the parking lines and put the car perfectly parked. Car companies, especially the big ones, can tend to make decisions like big banks. They don't like risk. They all get sued 100 times a day. I mean, they have massive legal teams on staff, making 5,000-pound boxes that we're all, traveling through space and time in. They are liable for a lot. The investment, I mean, I don't know what it is today, but I know like 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to make a new vehicle, it was a cash outlay of $1 billion to take it from like concept to actually the first one rolling off the line. When you're dealing with numbers like that, it's, with no guaranteed return, right? You're going to make it and you can focus group it, but at some point you got to move the metal and people are going to buy it or they're not. So I think that is driving a lot of that risk aversion. And some of that, I think a little too much can trickle into marketing at times. I think that like one car company will do something new really well, and it's very easy for other car companies to look at it and say, ooh, let's do that. And I've noticed over time, there's kind of these waves where like one car company will do a brand and it's like a unique thing and they'll own that. And then the other, somebody starts shooting the new style, you kind of create a new voice. When I say brand, it's like the voice, the look, the feel, the tone, that kind of undefined je ne sais quoi, that residue that sticks in your mind when you hear the name of the brand. What happens is like one car company will do something like kind of breakthrough and cool. And people are like, that's cool. And it works. It's not weird. Or it's risky, but it worked. So then all the other clients and car companies are like, that's cool. So they want to just do the same thing. Can you make it look like this? Can you make it look like this? And you'll see shooters get hot and kind of do the rounds and like shoot everybody's brand for them. And then all the brands look the same again. So then you got to come up with the next. And I think that has a lot to do with it. And the other thing that rarely gets talked about, I think, but it does have a big impact on all of this, is like, it's not razor blades, it's not, when you buy a car, you're not buying a pizza. You're not just parking your money in a different box that gives you checks and a debit card. I mean, it's the majority of people are leveraging a loan to buy something that is going to depreciate in value and cost them money to run and operate. And it becomes an extension of people. It's part of their personality. Anytime in your life, you can kind of look back and think about a period of time, and assuming you're not living in like a walking city, you can basically kind of attach it to a car, whatever car you were driving at that time. So they're a big deal. And so I think that advertising is, there's a lot of forces that want to kind of keep it within that box because they don't want to take too much of a risk and have it blow up in their face.
I know a lot of companies are trying to avoid, I call it the Bud Light effect, where basically you're targeting a certain specific consumer and then you change up your strategy, and in trying to expand your consumer, you end up offending people and then creating like a marketing nightmare. Automotive advertising is kind of political. People are using their vehicles to make a political statement on the road. How do politics play a role in what you do, and do you consider it? And if so, do you have rules or your yeses and your nos or your check boxes, or how does it affect what you do?
I don't know. It doesn't factor into any of my decision making. I stay out of it. If someone wants to put a flag on their car or a bumper sticker on their car, I feel like that's their business. I never really thought of how politics. I don't think politics does affect what I do, because I just want to make pretty pictures and videos of cars.
Of course, I think that's the idea. I just know, I know there's a lot of companies who do take politics into consideration and don't create certain type of content, or want to be safe to a certain extent so they don't offend certain people, but also, at the same time, don't turn their target consumer off. EV and gas have political sides in the public eye, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's unfortunate that it's, yeah. So it's, I worked at Disney for 3.5 years, and it was, I remember the handbook was like, we don't have political position. We don't, we don't take sides. We don't do this. We don't do that. We donate to both parties, blah, blah, blah. That's our story. Yeah. And now it's like, they couldn't stay out of politics whether they wanted to or not. Their hands have been forced. And, I feel like a lot of companies end up going that route. But that's cool that, it's not factoring into what you do.
To me, it's not political. I mean, there's a human element to it, like talking to everybody, in a brand like Chevrolet, their target customer is literally everybody. Their target, there is no, it's not like a razor blade where at least you're going after men who are old enough to need to shave, right?
Right.
Or people who identify as men who are old enough to need to shave. Will they separate men's and women? I mean, this can go on and on, right? I use women's razors because there's like 12 blades and all the moisturizing, and it's awesome. It's way faster shave for me, man. From what I've seen and some of the projects I've done for Chevy, including everybody is very important, but they're very different conversations that you have, right? Like someone whose job is to tow heavy equipment, to job sites and then use their truck, assuming they're towing for their job, they're going to want gas. They need to get from A to B as fast as possible, and they need something that's going to tow very well, and that's what works for them. Someone who, lives in a suburb and drives a similar circuit, most days to and from work, to and from the grocery store, going out to school, whatever, electric probably makes a lot more sense because every night the car's parked back in the house and charging. As far as the politics behind gas and electric, I don't know. And I don't care, man. I mean, everybody's just trying to make a buck somehow.
I get it.
I think people should just, drive what they want. I will say this though. I've driven a lot of electric cars, a lot of gas cars. Electric is by far the superior propulsion method, from just the instant torque, the silent operation, the super low center of gravity. I mean, a lot of electric cars, you can roll right over a speed bump at 30 miles an hour and barely feel it because of the physics of how the suspension articulates with the battery. So if you take away, the sourcing of materials, all politics, if you're just going to get in something and drive and have fun, man, electric all day long. It's so wonderful. And I know we're going to see a quantum leap in batteries soon.
Right.
And they're going to get way smaller, way more power dense. And then we're going to be driving like 500-pound things with 1,000 horsepower. And it's just going to be awesome.
The second something new comes out, everything else adapts to it, and then just, gets better and better and better. It's the same thing with, the horse and the buggy and the gas vehicle.
It's just more efficient, right? I mean, to me, it's kind of an economic question. Where's the basis of economics? It's the efficient movement of materials, right? Transference of material and energy through space and time. So, gas was better than horses. Horses are awesome, man. Like, who doesn't want to ride a horse through the woods? It's killer. But, if you need to go 500 miles, I want a gas motor in a car. Or if I need to go 1,000, quickly, right now, gas makes more sense than electric. But need to go to the store, electric might make more sense for a lot of people.
I've noticed a lot in my feed on social, companies doing advertising where it's kind of your regular everyday person doing regular everyday things using their product, and they have to mention that it's an ad, things like that. It looks like it's one person with their phone creating content. A lot of the people that I've had on in the last month and a half or so have noticed this year specifically, there's been a massive drop off in production, both for commercial and still in that respect, especially probably after February, March. A lot of people pulling money from the future to pay for the Olympics. You have the election literally today. Happy voting today. And then companies that are changing the way they're doing things. Publicis Group bought this group called Influential, and they have basically 3.5 million creators, and they're analyzing about 100 billion points of data daily to be able to connect.
Sure they are.
The product with the consumer in the most effective way possible.
Yes, of course. Yes.
When I am scrolling, I'm doing that thing where if I see something that I'm being advertised to, I kind of am more likely to flip through it faster, as opposed to when I see something that looks normal, but there is a product in it, I'm stopping and I'm looking because I'm like, wait, is this an ad? And say the last 5, especially this year, how has the process of advertising changed for you in what you're doing?
3.5 million creators.
3.5 million creators analyzing 100 billion data points. So there's a difference between influencers, creators, and content creators. Content creators are creating content for specific channels. Influencers, you're able to kind of attach any product to an influencer to be able to then market the product. So variations of that.
It's a lot of content creation. It's impressive. I still don't understand the difference though. I mean, I know what an influencer is, but a creator, I mean, hear me out here, right? Like it sounds like a really impressive slide from a pitch deck, but like there aren't 3.4,999,999 other Sean and Kips out there. You know what I mean? Like how do you differentiate like a professional, creator from content creators? Like, are we just talking about like,
there's people who are influencers who basically specialize in a particular, say, subcategory or niche, almost like a micro influencer. They're targeting a specific audience. Daniel Mack, for example. Hey, what do you do for a living? That particular guy. That guy is an influencer.
Right.
He has this particular audience. I've seen him do commercials for water purity in the Olympics. It's not really tied together. I've seen the finger skateboarder do Lexus. And then you have people that film themselves creating content. There's people that do this for YouTube, Twitch, not necessarily about them, but it's about the stories that they're telling.
Yeah, no, I understand the difference. I question the 3.5 million billable creators.
That's everything from like makeup to health to sports to, automotive. I mean, that's everything and everything that you could possibly think of.
Seems like a lot of people, man. But okay. All right. I digress. I'm not buying it, but okay. Good for them. That's an army of creators. What was the real question? Oh, I got sidetracked there.
With all these different types of content that's being generated now to be able to connect with consumer. And I've noticed, with a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing now, there's no need for a production company, an advertising agency, all this other stuff. They're literally, it could be a client to a company like Influential, where you're like, hey, get this product to these people. And they're like, perfect. We'll give it to 1,000 people. We'll convert this money into that particular sales, and that's it. So how has advertising for you evolved in like the last year or 5 years, the ask for what you're doing and where it ends up, and how that process has changed?
I would say the big change in the last 5 years is clients wanting more for less. And I think that the creator community is driving a lot of that. I was in a conversation the other day, and a client asked me, she's like, well, my cousin, he shoots car photos. Could he come along and shoot B-cam? And it's like, yeah, I mean, anybody with a camera can come along and shoot B-cam, but you're trying to define a brand, and that's kind of a specific voice and a specific, for me, it's a very specific story that has to be crafted, that has to be made. First off, like, yes, this year has been dead for everybody. I've been hearing from everybody that like there's just no production dollars being spent. I do think the election has a lot to do with it. I think big businesses particularly agencies, are very concerned about their business models moving forward. And there was kind of a quantum leap in image making and in capturing video and film when the mirrorless full frame sensor came along. All of a sudden, like, you need way less light. They're baking in, with a handheld rig, you can shoot 10x422 4K, 6K that looks beautiful. And you can put, you can swap lenses. 20 years ago, you needed $1 million and a film school degree and the backing of a production company to make something that could go on TV. And I believe it's been kind of democratized or socialized where like now anybody, not anybody, because, cameras aren't that cheap, but pretty much anybody can go get themselves, have access to a rig and go shoot something and, edit and finish on their laptop and deliver something. And, it's like, if it's good, it's good. Like if someone can do something for 20 grand and it's better than a $2 million job because it's just got that hook. So I would say that's a big change in the last 5 years, was that the equipment's way better and more efficient. So your crew, the resources needed to execute projects are much smaller, but there's kind of a point where like clients need to invest resources so you can build the right team and get the right equipment to do things the right way. With a Jeep and a Ronin, you can get about 80% of the way to a Russian arm, right? Or the Ukraine. But when you want, when you're like a global brand or you're, you need that, like that last 3% is what sets you apart from everybody else. You still got to spend some money if you want to make money, right? How creators affect that? I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a natural evolution of humanity, like we talk to each other differently and interact differently. And, and if you can go get a cheap camera and make a really cool thing that gets 20 billion views on TikTok, why not just do it? If you're saying something that's right for your brand, there's no reason not to. Hiring someone who's got a lot of good TikToks instead of like proven themselves as like being able to there's like a risk reward, right?
Right.
Like I can't take the guy who likes shooting cars, throw $1 million project at him or her and know that like every shot on the shot list is going to be good. Like it's super easy to take a car somewhere and just find a cool shot. It's super hard to create a specific cool shot that's like boarded up conceptually. And I think there's a bit of a struggle right now going on in the industry between clients who want to save money and get more, and they may see a cool TikTok that blows up and they're like, I want to do that, but they don't know how to get there. And then kind of like the larger production kind of doing more crafted brand work that then can seed across channels. Like you may not be able to take the cool TikTok video that's like zooming out and circling back around and zooming out and circling back around and have it work as a campaign in multiple places.
With the decisions they're making now, how much of it is data-based?
Oh, a ton, man. Like, so my whole like gig, right, is like go make a body of work of imagery, still in motion content that can then be chopped up into targeted messages. When I got into the industry, if we were launching a car, you'd come up with your spot, right? You might have a couple cut downs, you get a billboard, 3 print ads, then maybe do 3 banner ads. And each one was like a custom thing, right? You want a Suburban parked by a railroad track on a mountain at sunrise. Like that's the one thing you're going to make. Now it's more like, all right, strategically, we have these 7 buckets to fill. So we're going to make content that is aligned with these 7 buckets and looks and feels great. But then the messaging, the art we'll figure out basically later as part of campaign development. A lot of that is driven by, like on a big brand, Chevy was running like a global template system. You would target, consumer X who's into this, and this. So then the headline that's targeted at consumer X and the picture of the right vehicle doing the right thing at consumer X goes, and then it shows up in consumer X's feed when consumer X is here, and we know it's the right time to hit them with a car message. So I think data is driving all of it because it's quantifiable risk mitigation, If I spend this money here and I have real-time feedback on how it's performing, I'm going to do that versus just kind of throwing it out there. And I do believe it's the backbone of all that. However, there's always that little undefined magic human connection thing that has to go into all of it. And, all these companies are competing for that same person. So when you can make the thing that just kind of breaks through and they're like, ooh, I like that. I want that. I want to drive that. I want to be seen driving that. That's when you've done it right.
So with that said, how has AI made its way into what you do?
AI is kind of like the self-driving car so far. It's a great idea. It's coming, but it's not, Full driving is actually getting pretty good now. It is helping. I would say I have some personal thoughts on AI. Like for content creation, it doesn't quite get it, like if you ask it to, make a picture of a specific vehicle doing something specific, you get all the wonky stuff. The vehicle's never right and the stuff happening is never right. I've found, it tends to be like, it looks like you've got a really limited number of illustrators creating your work. Whereas I'm old enough to remember the directory of illustration where like when you had a campaign and you needed a look, there's 5,000 samples and you're going to find just that right art direction that really tells a story. I think it's just going to be another tool. However, I do know it is going to replace a lot of jobs within the advertising agency industry for agency world for sure. And it's already happening. The way ad agencies make money and have historically made money for the longest time, it was really the media. But in, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, someone figured out, hey, we combine all the media dollars in a separate agency for multiple clients, then that agency has all this leverage. A media agency can take like 20 clients' money and all of a sudden they're spending $20 billion or $10 billion. And then they get, I'm going to buy all these ad spaces from, these publications. So the publications can then give them a bigger discount because they're buying more spots, right? Across multiple clients. In the old days, an ad agency they were more like a law firm. They offered advice a lot more. Like, oh, you want to do this, you should do this to sell that product. And then they would build a campaign and then they would place the campaign where it was most effective. And so if your client was going to spend $30 million on their marketing budget, there would be a retainer for the creative work you were doing. And then you would go out and the agency would place that $30 million after the concept was approved based on how to influence society's perception. And then there was an instant markup, but it was like 10, 15%. I mean, I'm sure it went up and down slightly from agency to agency, but that was like gravy. So that's like $3 million right to the bottom line that the agencies can invest in talent, equipment, office space, whatever they want, bonuses, whatever they want to do. So then like 15, 20 years ago, someone figured out, hey, if we just take all the money and make a separate media buying agency, we can get way more exposure for our client's dollar. Now, instead of a dollar buying one ad, it's buying 2.5 ads. So what client isn't going to want that? More impressions for the same amount of money. But then what I have seen happen is, you may have a media plan before you have a concept or before you know what you're going to do. So that was a little wonky for a while there because maybe you got a bunch of print insertions you need to do, but you don't really need print insertions at all. You should just be like buying an airplane and doing this with it. But the media plan's already figured out, so you got to stick with that. I don't know, buying an airplane seems like a cool stunt. So now, now that big data is driving a lot of that. So now it's like, okay, I want 6 billion impressions on guys 25 to 34 who are into video games. Boom, you buy the impression. So the creative has to kind of be developed to fit within a system that will deliver those impressions to people. There's that, right? That's changed. So they made their money on the media. So that went away. So then they made their money on butts in seats, on open recs, billable hours, right? So if you have 100 people working at your agency, they're all billing out $200 an hour. You want as many people as possible working in your agency because that's where your revenue, you bring in accounts, you hire people to staff the account, and anybody in agency role has been through it, and then you lose accounts and people get cut. It's like being on a baseball team, right? Every season's different. Now what is happening is AI can replace certain functions within an agency. One that really breaks my heart, but it is what it is. The production studio, like resizing ads. You sell a campaign, maybe it's in 50 different magazines. Every one of those ads needs to be built because every magazine's slightly different. Every website has slightly different specs. And those are humans developing all those versions. Those are billable hours. So it's revenue for the agency, employment for people, all good things. Now AI can do that. The last I saw, it's 250% faster and 30% less expensive to basically get a subscription to have an AI program handle all that instead of having humans do it. So as an agency, you can offer that to your client, or your client can buy it directly. I'm not sure what the arrangement is because there's probably some markup because there's a lot of collaboration there. How do you replace that revenue or how do you continue to grow? And that's been a big change is agencies understanding. I believe agencies are starting to understand that content creation is the backbone of, the creative world. How can they morph to like still create the value for their clients and still make money? So, we've seen agencies get more and more into content creation, oftentimes kind of in-house production studios where they freelance everybody on a project by project basis. Some people hire people full-time. Every place seems to be just a little different, but ultimately, I think their content creation and production is going to meld more with creative and the media planning and placement. And that's companies that do that really well are really going to thrive.
Are you guys doing less productions but creating more content?
I don't know, man. Because everything's kind of like changed with the whole like GM moving the new agencies and then me moving over to McCann. Commonwealth had a separate office in downtown Detroit, and McCann has a beautiful office. It's an awesome place. It's a different business, different setup. General Motors is still our biggest client here, even with Chevy moving on. I feel like moving with that change, it's hard to give you a good answer for that question because that kind of threw everything up in the air.
So what does the future look like? Are you excited for the tools that are being presented to us, or are you a bit skeptical about? There's a lot of things that could change, right? Like TikTok could go away and you'd be stuck with Instagram and Facebook. X is a bit controversial, so I know a lot of people have cut spending on ads for there. You got streaming, you have the ad tiered subscription, which is growing. Interactive ads where your TV pauses and you get a barcode that pops up. Then you have the Super Bowl, which is something everybody looks forward to in terms of like that's their thing.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I think they're all eyeballs, and ultimately, it's the game we're really in is attention, and that's what gets monetized is consumers' attention. Because if the more of someone's attention you get, the more you can influence how they think, the more influence you get. It's constantly changing. It's constantly gonna change. Every placement, every consumer touch point is always an opportunity to start a relationship, strengthen a relationship. Although those touch points may change, it's just about adapting to be appropriate and to hit people where they are. So like Super Bowl, you've got 1 billion people watching it. If you're a big enough business and the timing is right, then it totally makes sense to do a Super Bowl spot because you'll get the eyeballs when people are there and people want to see commercials on the Super Bowl. I love Super Bowl spots. The text coupon at the right time, maybe that's it. I mean, advertising's so dynamic. It's like we don't really make ads anymore. I see a lot of like brand work actually mimicking CRM, customer relationship management marketing. And part of that's because I'm in automotive, but it's like once someone has bought your product, it's so much easier to identify who they are, engage with them, start a relationship, reach out to them when it's time for a new product or the product needs help, and create a brand ecosystem. And it's kind of ridiculous to think, why does mouthwash need a brand ecosystem? They kind of do. At certain points, at certain times, if it helps you sell mouthwash, then you got to be at the right place at the right time.
I think we probably jump into our 10 questions.
It's time for
10 questions. Is that a yes or no, or what do you think?
10 questions.
All right, cool. What initially sparked your passion for creating automotive brand content? What was that one moment you'll never forget?
Man, I don't know. I just always loved car commercials. Like even when I was little, just loved cars. I was reading, Road and Track, Car Driver, Automobile Magazine, back when magazines were around. And I used to love going on car websites and just dreaming about driving cars. Like I had wanted to work on car. Actually, you know what it might have been? I was working at McCann Erickson when we first moved to Detroit. I was freelancing for a while. The design team that did catalogs for GM was in the Lightroom and they were marking up some of their retouching. This was back, they were still shooting on film back then. It was like digital was along and a few people had embraced it, but for the high res, you still needed film. They were just standing there like making these teeny little marks on this photograph, making it better. Something in me was like, I want to do that. And then I got some opportunities too, and it worked out.
That's funny.
I don't know. I never really thought about that.
You remember MPH magazine?
Yeah, but it's been a while. Yeah.
Dude, that was my favorite. I got to do all the compositing for that thing. So that was like, I loved that thing. They sent me pictures of cars, the floor of the Detroit Auto Show, and I got to cut them out and put them on the streets of Detroit at night in rain with thunder and lightning.
Yeah.
The sky was the limit. It was like, here, go have fun. I miss that sky's the limit stuff. It's like.
Yeah. Well, how did you get into that?
It happened in college. I went to Art Center College of Design. My dad lost his job in my 6th semester. You weren't allowed to shoot digital at all. So I had a motorcycle. I sold my motorcycle. I bought a scanner. This school had one digital camera. I shot all my projects on digital and I used my computer to then Photoshop my images to look like mistakes, like light leaks or like creases and negatives. The only way I passed the semester was being able to Photoshop my stuff to look like it was shot on film. And then I started working for Jill Greenberg and Moshe Bracha, as posing for them, and then went right in with Robert Carrion. He let me go into his library and just was like, have at it.
Wow.
Looking at it, he's like, oh, I just did this thing with a Nissan Xterra or whatever. The forest was burned down and blah, blah. I'm like, who gives a shit, man? What would Satan drive? Like making ads out of the stuff he would do. And I started working with Darren Johnson in like 2003. I think it was Automobile, and, MPH came along. It was like, dude, sky's the limit. And, I got into photography because it got to the point where they were just handing me just a card and being like, fix it. And I'd be like, all right, now I got to go shoot this stuff. I'd do like the whole thing, and then somebody else's name would go on it.
Yeah.
It's always kind of been the shiny, beautiful thing for me. It was the be able to composite all this stuff. The Nike split screen campaign, during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Even as a car photographer, it's funny, a bit on the retouching, and they're like, no, I've been compositing for Carrion and Fetz and, all those people forever. And they're like, no, we can't. It's totally separate. I said, would you ever go to your favorite restaurant and have your chef make your favorite dish? You'd go out, get all the recipes, and then he'd bring in somebody else to put it together for you. It just didn't make sense to me. It's the way it's always been. Compositing is just different now anyways.
First off, what an amazing school. Art Center. Like, wow. There's definitely like a mental box I think it's hard for people to get out of when the photographer's like, hey, you want me to do the retouching too? You never know if someone knows how to deliver true finished retouching. It's a bummer that like you're in resistance to that, because it just seems like a no-brainer for you, man.
There's stuff I've gotten that was purely out of necessity because I could composite it. When they launched the 86, there were fires up at Angeles Crest. You got to shoot these things on these windy roads. We lost our permit 3 times, and I was like, I got it. I took a car up there, was kind of the same model, and shot it. All the places I wanted to shoot, put it as a placeholder. Mm-hmm. It was during the winter, so it was later in the day. Everything was in shade. I said, get me an airport with a hangar. And what I could do is I can shoot the car in shade. And I bought Christmas trees to put up around the vehicle to reflect as the reflections. And we shot the car. Yeah. I lined up all the angles to be able to then put it together and post on these roads, with the virtual rig and all that other stuff, in the background.
Nice.
Yeah, compositing just, for me, it's like I was saying, when I shoot, like to shoot the back plates so I get the best time of day, the best plates of the vehicle, and then something else for lifestyle. But yeah, it's nice. Things change. I feel like I don't know that the shiny, pretty picture is the thing anymore. If it seems like people want to relate to stuff more when their favorite person they see is with the car that they kind of want. Is that going to touch them more than the shiny things we've been doing forever?
Strategically, yeah. Just from what I've seen in the industry, I feel like the auto industry, about every 10-ish years, the strategy changes, and then everybody pursues that. And a long time ago, it was like, in a world of the same stuff, stand out in this car. And every car company, that was their thing. A lot of it's about like authentic, organic human connections now. Don't give me like, give me somebody who's like, looks like a normal person. Show me how the car like fits into their life. It's not all about triumphant moments and larger than life things. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's for whatever social movements or mindsets or whatever make certain things resonate more profoundly at different times. That's definitely the time I think we're in now, from what I'm saying, for sure.
Yeah. I feel like you're more likely to see content of me creating that pretty picture. And like I see like Kia, like I feel like I see more of how they make those their commercials, on my social channels than I do of the actual commercials, it seems like.
Oh, for sure, dude. Yeah. Like I never see Chevy commercials. Yeah. I never see a lot of spots, but then I'll see stuff online. I mean, honestly, it's like this is the new TV, right? The phone, the screen you're on.
I mean, I see plenty of Corvettes and street takeovers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's like they're all over the place. What's your dream car?
Man, there's so many. I get asked this. I do have to say there's something about the Ford GT40 when they brought it back in the early 2000s. The proportion on that vehicle is just wonderful. And the new GT, it's carbon fiber. It's spectacular too, but there's just something about that early 2000s Ford. That and Jaguar XJS V12 Coupe from the late 80s, early 90s. That thing is just such beautiful shapes, lines, proportion, everything. It's a money pit, but that ain't. Some people say they're money pits, but I just think they're great. I just think they're beautiful.
What's the craziest moment creating a recent Chevy campaign?
We've had quite a few. We had a brown bear walk into set one day in Colorado. That was kind of weird. We're just like sitting up on some mountains shooting, like a heavy duty Silverado driving up this like muddy road. And we're like waiting between setups. He's like facing down the hill and we're like looking up the hill at him. And this like big, massive bear just like walks out the side of the hill and like stops and turns and looks at us. Dude, is that a bear? And he turns around and he's like, oh yeah, bear. He's like a stunt driver, you know? So anyway, it's like, no, wait, dude. Like, nobody got hurt or anything there. We did have, we had a vehicle get damaged once. We were shooting in Joshua Tree and it was like a hand-built, what's called an Ivor. So it's like a prototype that's just held together. It's like some carbon fiber, some sculpture. You don't really know what. The sand had gotten under the car cover driving into the park and scratched the paint. You couldn't see it until you hit it with a strobe. And then it was just like spider webs. And in fact, Car Prep, which was West Side at the time, had gone and gotten like double car wraps to cover it up because, they're total pros, but that wasn't enough. So they took the car from us when we got back to LA and we went up to Mammoth and we wound up just shooting back plates. We got another property back in Detroit and put it in a studio and shot that to marry to the back plates. And got really lucky because it worked out. That was Traverse launch. One crazy shoot we did, Seattle. I was working with Dana Neibert. And Dana was there for the bear and Dana was there for Traverse as well. Yeah. It's funny because you always want to work with new people, but sometimes from a brand, when you like nail it, you want to brand iconography for a while. And we had a great run with Dana and his team. So the concept was we wanted the Tahoe and Suburban on a boardwalk across a body of water from a downtown. After like scouting everywhere and we couldn't find one, our grand idea was to get a barge and put the vehicles on it. So we got a barge and a tugboat in the Puget Sound and drove this tugboat out in the middle of Puget Sound and had a Tahoe and a Suburban on it. We were in a cherry picker basket just a boom lift out over the side of the boat shooting back, to get the draw we needed. And, and then it just looks like, the photos were super rad. And it was just a wild day. Nothing crazy happened, we didn't die. We didn't fall in the Puget Sound, but that was pretty surreal to be, we're just tooling up and down downtown Seattle with a couple of vehicles on a barge. That was awesome.
One of those moments where you're like, I have the coolest job ever.
Yeah, that was an awesome day for sure. For sure. Yeah.
What would you be doing if you weren't in your current position?
I don't know, man. Maybe like a firefighter or something in like construction or property development. I like helping people. I don't like sitting still. I like working with my hands and making stuff. Yeah, I don't know. To circle back, we were talking about influencers. My wife is an influencer. We started a YouTube channel during the pandemic lockdowns. Channel I do with my wife is called Senior Shape Fitness, and that's been going very well. Maybe do that. The other thing I did during pandemic, I bought a small apartment building. Turns out so far I've had some good luck with it, kind of a knack for it. I really like it. So I'd probably do more of that, get more properties.
What's the biggest challenge in keeping brand content evergreen?
Fashion. Yeah. It's like styling of the talent has a lot to do with it because fashion is so like specific and changes so much. Something like the way people dressed 7 years ago is very different than how like cool people dress today. I would say that has a fair amount to do with it. Yeah, it's fashion. Like when we like view an image, like, we pick up on all these little minor little details without realizing that will like form a conclusion in our mind of what it is. And like the way people are dressed, the graphic design of an environment, the architecture, like all those things, the more timely they are, the more finite they become as far as how long they stay fresh. Put a beautiful vehicle in the desert at sunrise or sunset. And when is that going to get old? Maybe it will get old, or like the salt flats, right? Like salt flats, everybody did the salt flats and nobody did the salt flats for a while. Like I hadn't seen anybody shoot salt flats for like a big brand shoot for like probably 20 years because like everybody was out there. So we took Silverado back there. There really wasn't a lot of dry lake bed salt flat work happening at the time. And we just did it because it was cool. It worked. And I've seen a lot more stuff like that since. I'm not saying everybody's like following us. That one in particular was like the salt flats are yet again, now it's like kind of too easy and a cliche because everybody's been shooting it 8 years ago. It had kind of been forgotten, I think, because it was so overshot. Right now, nobody's doing Brooklyn or cobblestones, whereas there was a period of time where like everybody was shooting on that one street in Brooklyn with the bridge.
If you had to choose between shooting a sports car on a racetrack or a 4x4 truck rock crawling, what would you pick?
Oh, dude, I don't know, man. That's like asked me to choose between my children. I love them both. They're both so much fun.
That's fair. Yeah. How do you keep visuals fresh while staying true to the brand?
I can be very obstinate about protecting my creative vision. I used to work for a guy once. He had a thing is he'd say it's like geology, gradual pressure over time. You can take the feedback that changes it, but then you can always, but sometimes you just got to shut up and, do what the clients say. Because at the end of the day, it's their money, right? What are you going to do? A good way to do it is do exactly what they say and then do what you want if you have time, right? At the end of the day, it's like, you throw them on the wall, you look at them, and people, you can pretty much tell. And like, that's the weird thing. It's like the universe, like when you get the shot, it tends to be universal. Most people are just like, yeah, that's the one.
All the other ones are just there to show you that they aren't it.
Yeah. Or like, all right, I know that's what we discussed, so we'll shoot that, but we found this thing over here, so we're going to run over and do that. And then later you throw it up. Hey, I remember once it was at Traverse Shoot in Joshua Tree. There were two people running the Chevy. There was a guy named Paul Edwards, who is now, I believe, retired, Steve Majoros, and another guy, Shondor. Just awesome clients. And Steve ran like cars and SUV, and Shondor was trucks. Shondor is now like running like Canada, or like he's and then Steve's like the CMO of Chevy now. I mean, they're both gone on to bigger things. But the last thing he told me, he's like, don't do something stupid, like shoot it under the Milky Way in the middle of the night. It's like, all right, man. So we get out there and like, we're Joshua Tree and the Milky Way comes out. It's like, it's like, dude, we got to shoot this, right? And we take it back and he looks at it and he's like, yep. And he's like, that's awesome. When you see it, it just becomes apparent, which is, if it's great, it's great. Just kind of feel it.
Which moment in your career hit you emotionally the hardest? It was like, give you the feels in the gut.
Losing my first job. I had no idea. Advertising is not an industry that you get into and stay in a job for 40 years and retire, and they give you a watch and a big fat pension. One of the best analogies I've ever heard, I don't really watch sports, but it's like being on a baseball team. There's a manager and they got to change the roster every year based on what's working and what's not. My wife and I moved to the West Coast and I got this job at a prestigious shop that didn't hire juniors, but they took a risk on me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it. It'd be awesome, man. And I didn't know anything. And I knew how to use a computer and how to come up with ideas. I knew how to address a brief, but I didn't understand all the things you really need to understand to work in an ad agency, and particularly an environment like that where just everybody, it was another place where like everybody was just a walk-in big gun. And, and the owner came to me like about a year later. He's like, dude, I don't know that this is working out. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be great. Yeah, I can do it. Like not realizing like when you're having that conversation, dude, so, I hung around for a while and, things changed and I got cut loose and it was just such a surprise. I was like, wait, but isn't somebody going to come like train me or I didn't know that I was supposed to reach out to that person I didn't even know that was somebody's job. I thought I was supposed to do this but whatever. Right. So that forced me to, I went out and I started freelancing, started pounding the pavement, worked for some agencies, picked up some clients. So even though it was a big punch in the gut at the time, like everything, it always wound up opening new doors and being better. But it was a real shock. I was like, wait, what? Like, don't I get like 3 strikes? Don't you guys isn't there like a probation thing? And no, man, this is advertising, right? It's just, you can't take it personal. It's just, it's like they say, I think it's Goodfellas, like, this is the business we have chosen. Right? I do wish now I could go back there. I was just young and dumb and thought I was a hot shot and had no clue how much I had to learn. I wish I could go back there today. Honestly, like repay them for the opportunity they gave me because I learned a lot. I was just in over my head. And he told me that when he hired me, but I didn't have the maturity to really hear that when he told me because all I saw was this job in the biz, and so that was a gut punch, but yeah, what are you going to do?
What's the biggest lesson you've learned in brand building?
When you set out to rebrand the company or further a brand, there's a lot, especially when you do a full rebrand, there's a lot of pressure to basically do a different version of a brand that already exists. And guiding people to a totally fresh new place on a large brand, it takes a lot of hand-holding and trust and time to get people to kind of open up to like a totally fresh thing that's never existed before. As a creative, it can get frustrating sometimes because people maybe don't see the greatness that exists in your head. Guiding them through that process, and being able to do that is probably the greatest thing I've learned, because a brand is a very hard to define, very big, important thing, because at the end of the day, it is how your customer and your consumer perceives your company, and developing a new one and make is a big journey. Yeah.
Bonus chit chat. Oh yeah, chit chat.
So I have this theory about viral being shock value and classic being memorable and invoking nostalgia within the viewer. Like you're hitting on a moment in their life that they're relating to what they're seeing, to then be able to make that personal and memorable, as opposed to viral, which is, oh, I've never seen that before. That's shocking.
Mm.
The idea, I feel like, with brands is if you build it, they will come. If you create a culture where people can exist and do things that they love doing, and there happen to be products as part of that particular environment, then the consumer wanting to buy those products becomes a byproduct of that culture, like brand immersive experience. I wish the future of advertising was Canada Goose going in a Lexus with Yeti and Patagonia to go view the Northern Lights in Calgary on a trip that, a bunch of people I enjoy watching, or influencers or whatever, get to embark on this experience and relate it back to me from their perspective that I can't do because I have a 2-year-old at home, but I get to lose myself in their content. And then ideally, they get to edit their own version of that particular content that they share on their channel. And it gives all the other brands a chance to get visibility to consumers they wouldn't necessarily be able to target. It's the idea that, hey, you can get 5 or 6 or 8 brands together. They can all create content together. And then you get more viewership and more impressions than you would traditionally do by just, this is us building our content the way we want to build it.
I see. It's like
agree on a
like
storyline.
cross brand. Yeah.
So it's everybody gets their own content back and gets edited for their channels. And then the people that you have on there are in the content, then show their version of the story with the content in it. Really more about you're selling stories to people with viewers as opposed to advertising. Like the products are secondary. It's almost like product placement in a movie.
Yep. Yeah.
It's the same kind of idea, but it's like real life. Advertising's been doing things the way they've always done it. Clients are being pushed to use new forms of content because that's the way some other people are able to sell their products. Agencies' hands are being forced to do things they're not used to doing, which then ends up in a kerfuffle with, like the finger skateboard person, with Lexus. How is there not something in between all of that? I feel like that's what Influential is trying to do now, where they're overseeing that process. So it is more of a connective experience because they have data backing it up, as opposed to we're doing this because they're making us and we don't think it makes sense. So the content you're saying doesn't make sense. The hardest part of evolution is having to do the new thing with the old stuff.
For sure. Yeah. Advertisers now have to effectively be publishers. They have to be creators, Yeah, they're hiring out, they'll assemble teams of 3.5 million creators or whatever. But at the end of the day, with social media, when you're getting a piece of content from a brand, they're not interrupting the broadcast. It's not an interruptive ad placement. It's a more authentic expression of the brand and the brand voice. When you go to the website, when you get you interact with them on social media, that's the big change, is that instead of kind of attaching themselves to somebody else's cool content, like the Oscars or the Super Bowl or whatever, it's generating content that people want to seek out and engage with. That is rarely advertising, the adtastic formula, and you can break it down into like recency and frequency and all those kind of things that pay off in market research. But then, like, do people want it? Does it improve their lives? Do they seek it out? And in the future, in a perfect world, in my perfect world, the brands are just creating, that wonderful stuff themselves, or clever product tie-ins. Like a while back, Chevy inked a deal with Netflix, or General Motors did. And it's a multi-year deal to work General Motors into Netflix. I have no idea if this is the case. We just watched Dark Winds about a Navajo police, and it's shot in Monument Valley. It's just beautiful. That deal, because it takes time to make stuff, that show is all like, it's all vintage GMCs and old Chevys. Like, every vehicle is a General Motors car. So you wind up kind of getting these historical brand impressions without realizing it. It's a much more organic I think beautiful way of doing it because it's not force feeding people. It's just woven into the story, like you're saying. It's blending the line of advertorial content there's probably an ethics discussion that I'm not going to get into because I just think it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I feel like editorials kind of face the same thing. I have Alana Schur, I guess, in studio, maybe doing an episode with her and kind of figure out the future of, editorial and what that's all about. That's hurting, like Motor Trend's ad-based content, from what I've heard through producers, they closed up that entire shop and moved locations. They're more into the content and Motor Trend channel.
Interesting. Well,
majority of my work before was, I was getting, all my Toyota work was coming through Racer Media, and my Kia work was through Motor Trend. And a lot of it was stuff where I was actually able to pitch or ideas to the CMO in meetings like, hey, sky's the limit. What would you guys like to do?
Yeah.
They had money with a particular idea, and they're also doing an ad buy because they're paying for the licensing of the SUV of the Year award, kind of like an all-in-one. There's certain things that we were able to do before that, like you said, somebody has to break the mold and succeed in order for everybody else to hop on board and start doing it.
Yeah, for sure. But you also bring up a very good point there. And brands can go direct to creators now. I think the future, the industry has to ask itself, and I think agencies have to find the answer to, what value do they truly create for their clients? And what does that model look like? And they will, and they are. But it's definitely changing, right? Like if Toyota can hire you to do the Motor Trend job and you deliver it, they can take those assets and give them to their in-house agency and have them place them. Do you need an outside? I don't know. I'm not familiar with their business model, but everything seems to be getting better and faster and cheaper. Delivering that to clients is always going to win in any business, right?
To me, the best advertising, branding, and marketing content was the stuff that you didn't pay for. Was the guy with the Toyota truck that was driving through fires to save people, that ended up on social media. I feel like I call it the impractical jokers movement, where you're kind of doing everything mundane, everyday stuff. And the second you change something outside of cultural norms, people pull out their phone to start filming it. And I used to pitch ideas where like, hey, what if we were in downtown LA? We had somebody build an art installation, an outdoorsy desert scene, across 2 blocks, just bringing rocks and dirt and all this stuff. And then every day for a week at rush hour in the morning and the evening, we have somebody get road rage and just 4x through the art installation, through 2 blocks. And just everybody with their phone would just pull it out and watch this person just go crazy. And then on the last day of the week, you could have your PR day. The magazines could come out and test drive the vehicle on the track that they've built. You have the car in a flat hanging in the middle of downtown with a banner that says the new Telluride, and you could film that and launch the commercial at the same time, and do all your news as to like why this stuff was happening and people were going crazy.
Yeah.
You understand our humans are going to react to things. It's also real life. When you're able to manipulate that, I feel like you create like a genuine experience that's original and new. Those type of ideas get me excited about like what the future holds and what could be next, as opposed to finding the next influencer or whatever.
Yeah. You should get a job in an ad agency, man. That's a fun idea.
I hear they're not hiring.
they always say that,
Yeah, I had an advertising agency doing movie posters and DVD packaging.
Hey, cool. Yeah, fun.
2004 or 5 to 2009.
Awesome.
I had a Porsche 911. I was living, I was like a dumb fucking 20s kid living in West Hollywood, just like you said, partying and drinking. And I was like, pack of cigarettes, 2 Rockstar drinks, and 3 freelancers in my apartment. And we would just crank out comps like it was nothing,
Nice.
And then the crash came, and a friend of mine was like, hey, anybody who can do product development? It looks like I can. Give me 24 hours. I went to Kia and I took pictures of all the kids' rooms. Came home and I photoshopped each room to look like a different Disney franchise, like Cars, Monsters, Inc. So I took the job, and then of course 2 weeks later, they get 2 campaigns. They're like, hey, you want these? And I was like, I just closed it up. All the studios were bringing their print in-house.
Yeah.
I learned a lot, like, launching Tron and Toy Story 4 and being able to do these cool partnerships with Adidas, New Era. And I hated politics. I just couldn't. I'd have an idea that I was obsessed with. And then, I'd bring it to my boss and they'd be like, we're not doing that. And I was like, okay, I'll just go stand over at the water cooler and bring it up to the GM when he's getting water next time. I didn't understand how politics works. So I would literally I was like, hey, let's put light up and everything for Tron. I was like, let's do it. Shoes, backpacks, like it'll be awesome. And they're like, great. Brought the entire department together. They did that. And then right before we were done to launch everything, there's this reorg. VP creative director moves all of our people into all the positions I had. And I get stuck doing Disney home painting and carpet. Then they have their town hall. Congratulations on all your product launches. And GM's looking at me like, this is the game. If you don't want to play, this is,
Yeah, man. And having gone from owning and running your own business into that corporate culture was probably,
Yeah.
it makes it hard to take it seriously when it happens to you, when you go from running your own show to that kind of stuff, right? That's terrible.
MPH was the only thing I still had that was freelance. So when I was done, I was like, I'm just gonna go back to that. And then, after a year of making stuff out of nothing or saving people's butt, I was gonna start shooting. I was on-site compositing with Vincent Dixon, and then that's where I met Kip. It was this shoot. The client was like, oh, it's too bad cars don't have engines, just can't have motion shots. And the photographer was like, Sean can do it. I was like, do you really want to show the cows where they get the milk from or whatever? And
yeah.
that's where it started. And then he just used me for everything.
Dude, that's awesome.
Weird jobs where I'm finalizing the line of with for 5 days before they go to production because he hasn't made up his mind yet. And I get a call to like go do footwear, and I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, bring your computer. I was like, okay, $8,000 for a day. Like, I didn't want to do it. And they're like, okay. My wife's like, where are you going? I'm like, I gotta go to for something. She's like, I'm like, there's no way. There's nobody between me. Sure enough, 5 days with
at 8 G's a day,
plus double time and a half, and overtime.
Yeah, wow. And then were you like rendering them in 3D? Like,
the issue was that pre-production, you give a CAD design to the manufacturer, and then they make you a shoe and send it back to you. He had been on tour, had just gotten back, hadn't made his final decision on what to go to production with. So the contract would have been null and void if they didn't hit it by a certain date, because then they would have been able to make the shoes and get to the marketplace. They brought me in to kind of like minimize all the different options into just a handful that he would then approve to then say, like, this is what I want to make. So we were shooting probably 200 to 300 pairs of shoes a day, and then kind of Franken shopping different pieces together to then create the thing that he would then approve, because they couldn't actually have a physical model of it. So it was like me and two of the retouchers. And then I understood shoe constructions, what was possible and what wasn't possible with what we were doing. And the funny thing is, like, been doing footwear forever. We had never thought to ever get a composite artist to put together photoreal shoes to see what we wanted in order to go to production. It was always, oh, we have to take this 2D CAD and turn it into CGI, which will take weeks. Let's just get a pre-pro.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is just totally crazy to me that,
And had you learned shoe construction from working with Adidas? Is that where you kind of picked that up? Or,
yeah. When I was in footwear, headwear, and hosiery, like with Disney and licensing, you're just overseeing all the other brands. You're just making sure that they stay true to the storytelling of the character. They wouldn't use colors or textures or art that was associated with something else, and brand differentiation and stuff like that. So like when we were doing Toy Story, we were pitching stuff that was pie in the sky, like putting green soldier men and clear outsoles and high tops, like the big pink bear is an embossed overlay on the leather, it was like climbing up from the bottom. Just crazy things that we wanted to have made that we thought would be fun to do, like, limited editions of. The coolest thing for me was like when they brought a New Era, and I got to go to all the first like mini shorts that I had seen when I was like cartoons that were only like, I don't know, 15 minutes long or something, with Donald and Duck. I got to go back to the archives, and they actually pulled the sketches out from that. And then we used those as the artwork on the limited edition caps that we ended up doing. And they did one for each short. And it was so cool to be like, wow, I've touched the stuff Walt Disney touched. This is the coolest shit ever.
Yeah, that was that crew of OG animators that hand drew everything. And they had the mirrors by their desk to do the faces. And I read a book about that once. Fascinating. Like, man. That's so cool. And so it's like the actual, cells or gels?
The cells, The cells and the sketches. The sketches, and then all the stuff that they didn't use too, which is kind of neat to be able to see all that stuff. It's something I wish I had done it while I have kids, but it was still a blast to be able to have that opportunity.
Sure. Sounds like you learned a ton too. You had to learn a lot about things very quickly, I would guess.
They are so good at being able to take, they call it a franchise, leverage it horizontally across all their lines of business, from food to clothing to toys to literally everything. Yeah. And they were generating anywhere from $4 to $8 billion a year on their own. So because you're managing licenses, and you're taking anywhere from the cheapest one was an 8% licensing fee all the way up to like 50% for toys. And you're doing literally just $1 billion in revenue on just Hot Wheels.
Wow.
I started doing work for Toyota, I met with a marketing guy. I'm like, why isn't TRD Pro a fucking licensed brand? I mean, everybody and their mom would wear the crap out of this stuff, and not only that, but like be able to modify your car. If you just had a department to like oversee this portion of it, you're feeding the culture that is the brand. You're giving people what they want. I don't know how this happened. I ended up pitching this idea to Honda. They hired me to do a style guide for them. And we differentiated all the artwork for like clothing and backpacks, watches, shoes, footwear, everything between like music. They have a presence at music festivals. It's like people who would go to outside lands, what they would wear. And then you had classic, which was people who would actually modify their cars and go full tuner. And then we had like vintage, which is the helpful Honda person. The original reason why they came up with cars to like help people out. And that was all like simple modern designs with leather bags and Louis Vuitton and very like halo. And then we were able to like tear all that stuff out. We had done like super edgy stuff, and they wanted to have like a Chevy logo on a t-shirt. The head of their branding marketing calls me, is like, Mr. Yamamoto wants to know why we're doing all this edgy stuff. No, he's on the call right now. Can you tell him? And I said, I'm like 30 years old in the middle of like living at the desert this time. And I'm like, Chevy already has a presence in America. People wear the logo because it represents who they are and what they're about. I said, you need to set a precedence for what Honda is. Honda's edgy, sports, fast, tech. And if you don't set that presence in the marketplace and have the other brands want to emulate you, then you won't sell anything and nobody will want to be that. Everybody wants what their older brother has and become super futuristic and techy. Like people will then want that. You can't just put a Honda logo on something and expect people to want to wear that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And he was like, cool, I get it. And then hung up. And I was like, whew. I mean, of course, some of those things were like, you do all this work, they hire you, you do a style guide, everything's good to go. And then they have a reorg and it just disappears. But yeah, my entire life has been that. People that put sweat equity in relationships have retired. When I pitched this idea to Kia and they bought off on it, the pandemic happened and we ended up, going to rescue a dog in the middle of Moab, Utah. What I wanted to do was like a SWAT team style with the Kia Telluride would lead us out. It would be at night. There would be 3 helicopters lighting everything. We'd have quads, dirt bikes with headlamps on them. People were piling off cliffs with headlamps, like lighting the way of where the Telluride was going. We would film the whole thing, except the press people that we would bring with us, we'd tell them like, hey, you're just going to drive the vehicle and let us know what you think. But then we'd have an emergency in the middle of the thing and it would basically be like this high adrenaline, like SWAT, like we got to get out of here thing. And the Telluride would be this, that. And they were like all for it. They're like, this will be amazing. The pandemic happened and the ad portion of Motor Trend got dissolved and all this other stuff. It's just, they cut off seeing portfolios and meeting with people. And, how do you connect with creatives? And this entire industry is built on like rumor, hearsay, and BS. And it's like, I want to know what's going on. So I started the podcast, be able to give people insight into what you do and then be able to see, people that are creating content, what they do and kind of understand how it all gets married together. And hopefully people that are listening to the podcast being a place to be able to do things will then hear it and then maybe apply it to what they're doing to just know that what they're holding on to now may not be there tomorrow.
For sure. But I think when you know that it's when you know that what you're holding on to may not be there tomorrow, it's reassuring to know that there's a community of people doing the same. You can learn so much from people in this industry and how they approach things. And it's super cool that you are interviewing this because I feel like it's a very, very small world, but we're all kind of interconnected and less interconnected now than before. Cause you're right. Like there's the in-person stuff went away. The book show thing is like not really, you can kind of force one and make it happen, but it's just kind of different. You don't know who's going to be there when you get there.
Yeah. People are 12 meetings deep and they're, you want them to get to know you and they're like, is this over yet?
Yeah. Bonus chit chat.
What excites you the most about the future of automotive advertising?
The vehicles themselves. I think all mobility and transportation is about to undergo this quantum leap and we're all going to have to be a part of helping tell that story. I think about like an autonomous RV. You could like go on vacation 6 hours away. On like Monday morning at 2 a.m., you can be asleep in your bed and it'll just start up and drive you to work. And it'll wake you up an hour before you get there and you can have some coffee and take a shower and get ready and step off into your office, which may actually be a different room on the motorhome and you go somewhere else. We're going to have exoskeletons. We're going to have little single seat electric things for just ripping and, other things without steering wheels for getting us around town. Helping tell that story is the most exciting time. I think now is a very scary time for creators and creatives. Like AI is coming along and a lot of the big agency networks and the industry itself is trying to like pitch all this AI and capability. We can do more with less and more with less. I mean, I work with AI every day. You can't really do that much with it, man. Like, you can increase resolution on things really well. That stuff's working pretty good. I made some storyboards the other day. They were a little wonky, but it actually worked in my favor, like, because everything was slightly off, so the clients were able to visualize stuff with their own imagination. I think like cars and vehicles themselves are about to just change so much that we're all actually going to be really busy. I don't think the computers are going to replace creatives anytime soon because they don't have emotions. They don't, even the largest language model or, AI at the end of the day is working on Boolean logic. If then, it's just very complex data set dictating that Boolean logic. Telling an emotional story is the only way to kind of break through and move people.
10 questions!
Is there any advice you would have given your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, party less, work more. Yeah. It's funny, like when I look back on like the first TV shoots I did, I was lucky enough to have a job with a partner who was one of my best friends in Nashville. Just this amazing copywriter. And, we'd sell a TV campaign and go out. And like every night we're going to the bar. And every junior team I know almost every junior team I know does this. Now it's like when I go on a shoot, I just want a warm bed, ideally a kitchenette. I don't want to stay at Shutters. I want like the Holiday Inn Express with like clean sheets and a quiet floor. So you just focus on doing the work because that's the real magic. That's what matters. That's what, lasts, not the laughs you have in the bar in Santa Monica. Nothing against Santa Monica or bars, but, probably should have taken a couple gap years or something before I started working, but you got me here. So
What advice would you have for somebody getting into the business that wants to do what you do?
Shoot cars, get some kind of camera and shoot. You want to do what I do, get really, really, really proficient at the tools we use to tell stories. Photoshop, if you want to edit, Premiere's nice because you can do some rough color, but there's a lot of capability within it. I worked for a guy once, he had a saying, luck is the residue of hard work. I firmly believe that. I think he's totally right. Like if you spend every day just crafting images, you're going to get better and better and better. And every hour you spend is an investment in yourself and your skills. If you go take a pretty landscape photo and you put it on your computer and you pop the sky and you green the trees and you clean up this or that to make, add a little vignette, whatever it takes to give it a little pop, like you're building your skills. That's like going to the gym and lifting weights if you're, an athlete. It's like cooking if you're a chef. I think so many people, particularly younger people getting into the biz, are taught, don't spend the time unless you know what you're going to get back. And I just don't believe that. I think all you can do in life is plant seeds, and some will grow and some will die. But if you just keep planting the seeds, just do the work, great things will happen to you.
So if someone's trying to find you, what was the best place to check you out?
Don't come find me. If you need to get a hold of me, you can find me at Behance, Mike Brooksy, my website, MikeBrooksCreative.com. I'm on Insta, I'm around. People can, email me or whatever. Yeah, email's good. But my YouTube channel, I do with my wife, it's called Senior Shape Fitness. It's going really great with their fitness videos for senior citizens. And so if you know anybody in your life who would benefit from that, please share and check us out on YouTube.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast and sharing those insights and, the birth of the Corvette and all that stuff was just really great. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And that's a wrap.
Just fix it in post.